We need to find a way to get in good trouble, necessary trouble, if we're going to save America.
This is Paige. Welcome to the Necessary Trouble Show. Here's your host, my dad, Russell Fugett.
Thanks, Paige. Welcome back to the Necessary Trouble Show here in the Good Word Digital Studios. I'm very excited about today's episode. After taking a week off for Thanksgiving, I'm excited to have Amiri Nash join us. Amiri is the 2021 DC Youth Poet Laureate. He is a Black Lives Matter and LGBTQ activist, and he is a first-year student at Brown University and alum of the Duke Ellington School for the Arts in Washington, D.C., where so many notable actors and artists have emerged, and he's the next one in line. Amiri, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really grateful to connect with you today. Of course, I first, read your article most recently in Teen Vogue, and we're coming out of this election season, and I know you wrote that you vote because you don't want your grandmother to die in Trump's America. Tell us about your Guga, as you affectionately call your grandmother, and what prompted you to write that piece.
Yeah, so my grandmother, she's been just a really influential part of my life from the beginning. I learned a lot from her, and I'm so interested in activism and politics because since I've been very young, she's always taught me a lot about current events, and we've read the newspaper together and things like that. And I've just been reflecting, especially a lot in quarantine. We've all had so much time to just reflect about what's going on in our lives in general. And I feel like everyone just had or not everyone, but a lot of people have just had such big reevaluations of their lives in relation to different things. And I was just thinking about all the stuff that she lived through as a Black woman in this country, and living through seeing people struggle to get their voting rights, and like Loving versus Virginia passed, and just things of that nature that she lived through, and about how in some of her last years on earth as an older woman, she's living through again this cycle of oppression under a Trump presidency. And there were a lot of initiatives about getting the youth in my generation inspired to vote and things like that. And I was thinking about, what is it that really pushes me to vote? And it all kind of drew back to Guga, is what I call her, and how I don't want her to have to experience anything like what she went through for my generation to have the life that we have now. I don't want her to have to relive that. And I don't want her to have to go through that same thing again. And so many parallels were drawn between the era of Trump and the civil rights movement, and the way he, put people in cages at the border and issued a Muslim ban, and similar acts of oppression like that they just felt like it was too close to home for the things she had already experienced. So I wrote this piece that eventually I pitched to Teen Vogue and was picked up by Teen Vogue, about how the main reason I vote is because I don't want her to have to die if it were so to happen under a Trump presidency.
Beautiful, beautiful. I really enjoyed that, and I hope everybody can go check out on Teen Vogue. Now, you also had a piece in Out magazine that really talks about bullying and how it disproportionately affects Black youth like yourself, and how it must stop, and it certainly must. And I know a little bit about this area, but please tell us how. I know in the article you also talk about colorism. So how does colorism and homophobia impact Black youth like yourself?
Yeah, so there's a lot of, in general, the homophobia in the Black community is something that's really prevailing, and often Black, queer, which is queer is an umbrella term for LGBT, which is lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. And then queer is kind of just the umbrella term that encompasses it all. Black youth are often left out of this conversation and inclusion projects because queerness and homosexuality and things are often associated with being a white thing. And that's the way that it's represented in media structures and television shows and books and things like that. And we never really get wholesome love stories of Black lesbian women or Black gay men, and everything is really centered around whiteness in the queer community. So as a result of that, Black queer youth are often left out of anti-bullying prevention things, or they often don't receive the support from adults that is matching to their white queer counterparts. And because of that, Black trans youth actually have the highest suicide rate out of any group. And it just fuels a lot of imbalances with the mental health of Black youth. And not only is it an internalized thing, but adults don't feel the need to take care of Black queer youth as much as they should, which can result in things like homelessness or displacement, or, like I mentioned earlier, even in some cases, suicide. And I alluded to that in the article. There was a young boy, Nigel Shelby, and he was 15, and he experienced homophobia from one of his teachers in school, and he eventually took his own life, which was really a martyr and a monument of how much we need to include Black youth in conversations about homosexuality being something that isn't something that you have to be ashamed of, or that you have to feel like you're worthless because of it, and things like that. And that's what we talked about in the Out magazine piece. It was GLAAD Spirit Day, and GLAAD is an organization that really works to serve queer youth. And the piece that I wrote for Out magazine, which is the biggest queer focused magazine, was about how in the years going forward, we have to work diligently to include Black queer youth in inclusion programs and just center attention around making sure all of them are okay and protected.
What can folks like myself, straight, cisgender, or others who want to be allies, or adults, as you call us, how can we better be allies in some of the ways you just described?
Yeah, so one of the best ways to be an ally is not only by researching and really getting an understanding of everything and the history, but also just showing support to any Black queer youth that you may know, and making sure that in your conversations, when any Black youth are present, don't allude anything that's maybe borderline homophobic, or just anything that may give anyone an opportunity to believe that they are less than others. And I feel like a lot of times allyship can start in conversations that you have with your inner circles and communities. So that means also holding people accountable. If they say something homophobic, just tell them, hey, that's not appropriate to say. And just start there and expand your network of different people who are more accepting, if the people in your life aren't really as accepting as they should be, and as young Black queer people deserve.
As I said in the beginning, you're the 2021 DC Youth Poet Laureate. Tell us a little bit about your upcoming project with that, as well as your TEDx talk you're working on coming out soon as well.
Yeah, so I have been interested in poetry since I was in middle school, and I've always written poems, but I never really did anything with them. And I went to Duke Ellington, which is a performing arts school, but I actually studied classical piano there. So I didn't study writing or poetry or anything like that. And in quarantine, I started writing a lot more, and I decided to enter my poems into the DC Youth Poet Laureate contest. And I was invited back to the finals, which was, of course, on Zoom because of COVID. So it wasn't like it was I guess it was still a real poetry slam, but it wasn't in person or anything like that. But we all read our poems, and there was a bunch of other talented youth who were poets. Everyone was amazing, but I was actually announced the winner, which I'm really, really excited about. So I'll get to tour all the Busboy and Poet DC locations and eventually release a poetry book of my own. So I'm super, super excited about that.
Excellent.
Yeah. Well, and I filmed a TEDx video, which I'm also super excited about, and it should come out in a few weeks. And it was a really short but chaotic process of memorizing everything in time. And I'd never really memorized something, and all the TEDx talks, they have to be memorized. You don't get a teleprompter or anything like that. So It was hard, but I'm really, really excited. And it's about my experiences relating literature and the piano to my identity. So I'm super, super excited, and it's about finding personal freedom, and I'm just really ecstatic for it to come out.
Well, we can't wait to hear you perform your poetry and your tour, and hopefully in person in 2021.
Yeah.
We also cannot wait to watch your upcoming TED Talk. Amiri Nash, artist, activist, scholar, thank you for joining us today on Necessary Trouble Show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for watching the Necessary Trouble Show. Please visit necessarytroubleshow.com to support the show and to learn more. Subscribe to our e-newsletter and podcast, and follow us on social media at Necessary Trouble Show.
Good job, Daddy. This is Paige. Thanks for watching.